yeah, I actually do. Participate.
Oh, do we have Howard? He's here, right?
Yes. We're going to bring him to Portsmouth so that he'll be able to judge.
What, Howard is here? Good evening and welcome to tonight's City Council and Planning Board joint listening session. I am looking forward to passing the gavel over to the Assistant Mayor. Tonight is my 10th year wedding anniversary, and in an effort to stay married another 10 years, I am going to pass it to the capable hands of the Assistant Mayor, who's also the Chair of the Housing Committee, along with Councilor Tabor. Immediately going to pass it to Councilor Tabor, I believe, to begin the report out on the Portsmouth listens.
All right, I'm going to introduce Robin LeBlanc, but I have for 20 years participated with Portsmouth Listens, and for 21 years, Portsmouth Listens has convened dialogues to help make Portsmouth the best place to live, work, and play. And everyone here has participated in the study circles. These are groups of 8 to 12 citizens. They form their own opinions, do their own research. They dialogue with one another to reach consensus on their conclusions. Every group reaches its own conclusions. And with the more than 150 participants, we're into many thousands of hours of combined work and dialogue. So I look forward to hearing from every group. It's going to go brisk, it's going to go fast, and Robin LeBlanc, go ahead.
Thank you, John. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm Robin LeBlanc. I've introduced myself before at the kickoff. I lived in Portsmouth for over 40 years, and 2 years ago we sold our house and couldn't find a place to live in Portsmouth. So I know the housing situation here. And I'm part of Portsmouth Listens, and I'm still part of Portsmouth Listens. And I'm glad that all of you are here tonight, and thank you for giving us the opportunity for the study circles to present their recommendations to you all. As John said, Portsmouth Listens has been around for over 20 years, and it's a neutral convener bringing people together to explore different ideas that are important to the city. They've done, Portsmouth Listens has studied the McIntyre building, has studied where to put the middle school, has done master planning, has looked at budgets, all kinds of things in a very neutral way, but giving people space to really explore different ideas and to hear different ideas that are important to the city. Last summer, the city reached out to Portsmouth Listens and asked for its support for a community engagement program that's part of the Housing Navigator program, and that's a program, and I think Howard may speak to it a little bit later, but it's a funded program, and the Housing Navigator is charged with figuring out what needs to change in Portsmouth so that we can go forward with housing. So zoning changes, regulation changes, all different things like that. But that's all based on what Portsmouth wants and what Portsmouth needs. So we pulled together a steering committee, and the steering committee was made up of, there's a huge steering committee for Portsmouth Listens, but it was narrowed down, self-selected. It was narrowed down to Maria Solari, Lori Waltz, Bill Lyons, John Tabor, who was advisory. We were very aware he's on the city council. He was advisory only. He did not make decisions. He did not have any part of, so that there was any even thought of the fact that was being guided in a way that was not neutral. And really, we really appreciate his role there. Myself, and then Howard Snyder, the Housing Navigator, was also part of that steering committee. So with Howard, we set the agenda, we wrote the study guide, we found facilitators, we weighed in on outreach materials. The framing question is, what should the city consider as it makes plans going forward to expand housing options that will support Portsmouth as the best place to live, work, and play for everyone? That was kind of the framing question. So what should the city consider? And the study guide was written in a way that was really encouraged participants to explore different, look at different housing options, starting with the needs. And places to live, they're based not just on affordability and price points, but also on locations. Is it close to transportation? Is it in the woods? And design, for example, one-floor living, elevators, wide doors, accessibility, that sort of thing. So each study circle, there were 14 study circles, met 4 times over the course of 4 or 5 weeks. And I say 4 or 5 weeks because we had some snowstorms in the middle. There were 5 or 6 that met in person, and the rest were done virtually. And these study circles came together following the study guide to discuss housing issues and potential possibilities for Portsmouth. In addition to the meetings, countless hours were spent in between sessions. The participants did refining the notes taken during the sessions and doing more research. There were about 130 participants that completed the sessions. There were about 150 or more that signed up. And then through life changes and things like that, then some had to drop out. So we want to thank the facilitators, Bill Lyons of Portsmouth, Bill Maddox from Amherst, New Hampshire, Bruce Mallory from across the way in Kittery Point, Devin Scarrett from Exeter, Kristen Jeffrey from Portsmouth, Lauren Wolf from Portsmouth, Lori Waltz from Portsmouth, Lynn Kobsa, who is Connecticut and also Meredith, Rebecca Dawson-Webb, who was in Kittery, and we also had a woman named Sarah Kelly, who zoomed in from New York State. We really wanted to get really good neutral facilitators, and so this was a good mix of people who had good experience with that. So tonight, we're here to we're finding out for the first time, what the groups have each recommended, all of their hard work. What is it they discovered? What did they end up recommending? And before I turn it over to Group A, please, groups, be reminded 3 to 5 minutes max. There's a finite time here we have, so I don't think anybody's going to cut you off, but 3 to 5 minutes max, please, okay? So why don't we start with Group A, and then Group A, when you're done, you can turn it over to the next group. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gregory Groth, and I've lived here in Portsmouth for half a dozen years. And I have the honor, the pleasure of representing Group A and having to go first. I want to repeat the accolades. Our group guide was Devin Scarrett, did a great job. I also want to mention a person on our team who did probably the bulk of the work, and that's Crystal Cunningham. I don't know if she's here tonight or watching in. How do I advance? There we go. Okay. Group A is probably going to be known, I hope we're going to be known for our diversity, and that diversity took a number of ways. You can see the count. There were only 6 of us plus Devin, but we did have a diverse gender. We had gender diversity. We also had a diverse range of ages. I happen to be in my 60s, and some of the other group members are in their 20s. Millennials to baby boomers. I guess that means I'm a baby boomer. We also had a very diverse group in terms of our backgrounds, and I won't tell you who's who. You can probably figure out, maybe not, which one I am. But the other thing about our group, in addition to the backgrounds, the diversity of backgrounds, there was also a diversity of experience. And again, I won't say who and what, but there are members of our group who are very, very interested and devoted to the whole issue of housing, and it was great having them on board. I'm not one of them. It's not that I'm not interested. I obviously am, but I have no background in housing. Oh, by the way, if any time during my presentation I use the word I, what I mean is we, okay, because it is a group. Okay, problem statement. And I'm just going to go down with you, but I'll make some additional remarks. Obviously, there's a diverse number of housing challenges. I boiled it down, we boiled it down, see, I did it already. We boiled it down to affordability and also availability, if you want to think of it that way. Surging costs. Yeah, that's true across the board. There is going to be, of course, a difference between high-end housing and affordable housing, and I'll get into that briefly when we get to it. I'm an economist by background. Yes, housing costs are surging, but they're also very high, as we all know. Lack of affordable options is going to be what you'll see was, I think, the bedrock of our discussions. Yes, we have a challenging zoning and land use regulations. We had a member of our committee who knew a lot about those and was very helpful. Negative effects on the workforce. I'm going to tell you right now that by workforce, we mean not only the people that live and work in Portsmouth, but obviously those who work but do not live in Portsmouth, but would like to live in Portsmouth. Balancing affordability with regulatory concerns, yes. Again, bedrock of our group. Now I got to put my glasses on. Top needs. Portsmouth maintains regulations that go above IRC requirements. Now, I didn't write these, so I don't know what IRC requirements were, but we had a lot of discussion as to what the requirements for housing have done to Portsmouth's ability to have affordable housing. Cost, which creates cost to development, impacts the ability to create more affordable housing options. And let's see, incentives for developers to increase affordable housing. Right. Oh, here's what I added, and I will say I this time. In my mind, the high-end housing is obviously going to be regulated by the market. There's not a whole lot we can do, I don't think. Maybe there are things we can do to help there. People are going to come in, they're going to buy if they can, they're going to buy if something's available. We don't have a whole lot to do with that. But we do have means of increasing our ability to increase that affordable housing, the lower-end housing. And by the way, I just wanted to mention, we had a statistic here that we wanted to talk particularly about households at or below the median income range. And I thought we had said 50% of the median income range. Here we said 100% of the area median range. When I first read that, I thought, well, that means everybody. But in a way, it's true. Everybody's affected by that, the cost of housing here. And then we want clear goals and a willingness to consider creative and innovative options. That's what we need. And we did not attempt to go too deeply into the weeds as to what you guys should do, but we showed what we thought those needs were. Considerations. Improve affordable housing development environment by removing barriers. Again, if we've got things in place that are preventing developers from coming in and being able to build affordable housing, we've got to do something about that. And that's on the city. There's that statement, below median income levels, whether it's 50% of median or 100% of median, that's a lot of people. And then finally, participate in innovative housing initiatives. Duh, that's what we're doing. Okay, and so in summary, it's apparent, I'm just going to read what we've got. It's apparent that housing crisis is one that is nuanced and takes meaningful consideration and brainstorming. It is necessary to look at housing as a multifaceted concern which requires great care and understanding. This directly impacts the ability to maintain a thriving city that cares for its residents and the working force within it. And what we say there is Portsmouth housing market, the projections for the 2020-2030 that came out of that study, I think look kind of low, but maybe it's a starting point. And then finally, there is a lack of, or put differently, there's a need for routine evaluations of progress as we work towards improving the city's housing goals. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm with Group B, Tracy Kozak. I've lived in Portsmouth for 30 years, and I've done quite a few of these study circles. I think it's a great opportunity that Portsmouth has to come together as a community. I've never seen one with this many people, so I'm really inspired, and I feel like we can do this because there's so many of us. So to get through this, we have a lot of groups to go through, so I'll try to go quick but not skip anything. We had a big group, 10 people. We were not, I don't think, very diverse. We were all single-family homeowners. There was one ADU owner, but we all had really different opinions. There were different ages, but we're all common in that everybody was super respectful and willing to listen and try to understand the other point of view. Problem statement. There was a lot of talk about how do we provide more housing that's inclusive for all who need housing to keep Portsmouth great and to not lose all the great things that we love about Portsmouth, but we need to provide more housing to do that in a way. It affects so many people. We had a lot of talk about quality of life, and it means we reached consensus that it means different things to different people, of course, based on backgrounds and perspectives. We are finding that the current housing crunch is affecting quality of life for those who are unable to find housing or staffing for their businesses, or for those who are seeing neighborhoods, families, and friends have to disperse and move away because of lack of affordable options. So we did all agree that we do need some more housing at a variety of types and price points. Every week we met, we talked about a diverse array of options, a menu of housing options, and that it's really important for a healthy community to have a diversity of community in terms of age and background, economic, educational, ethnic, religion, gender. It's part of a healthy society to keep it functioning, to have all these different facets of society, and to make that happen, you have to have different kinds of housing. There was concern about how growth would affect how much can Portsmouth sustain in terms of growth, like is there a maximum? We want to protect our environment and the economy. Maybe, if you stop growth, it can affect the economy badly, or so different impacts. The choices we make in housing can affect the sustainability of our community. A lot of this hinges on transportation. You can't parking, transportation, how we get to housing from work to school to wherever people go. You can't just do housing without figuring out how people are going to get to and from their housing. So they go together. You can't have one without the other. And I think based on our discussions, there seems to be some room for improvement in transportation. Demographic representation, that's the variety. So those are our needs. The goals, the integrated communities, just kept coming up. Maximizing space. There was a lot of underutilized space that we talked about, mostly parking lots and sprawl and some of the spaces in back, I guess. There's been a lot of focus on the downtown, but Portsmouth is much bigger. We talked about P's again. That will probably keep coming up forever and ever and ever because it's such a huge percentage. If you look on a map, it's like a major portion of Portsmouth, and it just, it's kind of heartbreaking to see all that open space out there that's not really well utilized. And then keeping Portsmouth. We do have a beloved heritage here, and there's a lot of vibrancy that is, it creates opportunity and tension at the same time. So to take care in how we do things. And actions. Well, it pretty much comes down to zoning, really. And transportation is a big part of that. So I'm going to read the screen from here. The zoning modifications, I think we get into this a little bit more in the next slide, but let's see. Alternative centers to downtown. this ties into transportation, where there's not a lot of great transportation out in the gateway districts and further out down Woodbury and Lafayette. We do have the coast system and some options, but it's tough for folks who have, maybe work the third shift or have half shifts or go to school at different hours. The buses don't go to every neighborhood, and they're not very frequent at certain times of day. So it's difficult to build things on the fringes if you have nowhere to get to the fringes. The quality of life issue, different things with different people. And then, of course, creating affordable housing, if there is some way that municipal funds, state or city, can apply, how can it be done in such a way that it doesn't increase the tax burden overall, but is perhaps more equitable? And maybe there's a way to look at some of the tax structure of different ways to incentivize some housing that's more affordable. And additional subsidized housing. So there were some areas where there was some heated debate, and we agreed to disagree on some of the more densely packed housing for the lower income ranks. And for example, we talked about boarding houses. There was a lot of support for roommates types of living. But then there was also some distant memories of those with Brewster House or other incidences where there's sort of an image of dense living that maybe they don't want to have near them. So these are things that will always spring up when we're trying to build density in an existing established community. There's a lot of fear of things, experiences folks might have had in other situations that they project about that could happen here. So when revising the zoning and policies and the urban design of these centers, it's important to, the takeaways that we need to learn from the past and figure out how to do this better going forward. When going through all the past studies, this has kind of been done before, and everything we talked about in our study circles had been talked about previously. What we were encouraged by was that some of the progress the city has made over the past 10 years, the creation of the gateway districts and the ADU ordinances. So there is progress, but we realize there's a real long way to go, and that it's we're kind of, one step forward, 2 steps back, because the housing crisis is going faster than we can catch up. So there's a lot of work to be done, but a lot of momentum and support behind it. So that's all. That's all we had. Thank you.
And I'll say next, so you know when to, if that'll help. So I'm Janet Pulaski, and I'm honored to be representing Group C. So you asked us to think big, and you told us not to assume that anything was impossible. So we took that as our marching orders. We realized in our very first conversation that we shared a common vision for our city. Oh, you can go back one, so it's still on the first slide. Thanks. And our common vision is a more varied and affordable housing supply to accommodate the diversity of residents who would call Portsmouth home. We noted in all our reading what was assigned and what we unearthed, that there is a consensus on the nature of the problem and substantial agreement on what needs to be done. There has been no shortage of smart people who have made genuine effort over the last 2 to 3 decades focused on the problem of limited and unaffordable housing. Why, our group asked, hasn't progress been made? Next. So here we are, pictured where we reside and on our modes of transport. We are renters and owners, longtime residents and newcomers. You might think that would have led to disagreements. It didn't. We met virtually on Monday evenings and have taken to meeting in person since the first 4 meetings, first at the public library, and yes, most of us walked or biked, and then at the Liar's Bench to continue our conversations on the future of the city we envision. Next. So our problem statement, and I'll read it even though I hate reading PowerPoints, but I think it's important. Our problem statement is that structural barriers in the planning process prevent Portsmouth from implementing widely recognized, proven solutions to the lack of affordable housing. And that gets to the heart of the question. Why the decades of inertia? We may never know precisely. We cannot reclaim those lost decades. We do know, however, that now is the time to make sure that change becomes a reality and that Portsmouth realizes its potential to be the city of the open door. Next. So first need is to identify the structural barriers. Is it our municipal planning process, state regulations, zoning? Why do good ideas keep getting stuck? And 2, the city must do all in its municipal power to encourage the development of more diverse housing. 3, for our diverse, affordably accommodated citizens to thrive, we must together make our city less reliant on individual cars and more connected by other modes of transport, from bikes to buses. Next. The considerations for the city, and in some ways this is to reiterate, begin by removing the obstacles that have blocked and will continue to slow the implementation of plans to increase and diversify Portsmouth housing. For example, regulations requiring parking for all units. 2, create a planning process that encourages the development of housing affordable to all who want to make Portsmouth a home. And 3, organize a diverse, multimodal transportation system throughout the city. Notice that each goal comes with accountability. Next. So actions for housing choices. These are our calls to action. 1, we expect that the listening group's reports will fuel decisions of the new City Council Housing Committee. We hope that the new zoning ordinances will promote, rather than obstruct, the development of a diverse housing supply throughout our city, possibly with incentives. And we envision the implementation of the bike ped plan that has long been discussed in our city. Next. So additional thoughts. We don't want to add to the pile of reports already weighing down the shelves at City Hall. We were all stunned that so many well-intentioned citizens, planners, and political leaders have addressed these exact same issues for more than a decade. Now is the time to act. No more reports on shelves. That's what ROTS is. Include us. Deploy the dozens of people who are involved in these circles to listen and to help build consensus in the city. Invite us back to city council meetings to build momentum together. Next. So thanks above all to Annie and Catherine and Karen for their creativity in designing the slides, and to our whole group for being such amazing listeners. This report reflects the ideas of all of us, and our group isn't dispersing anytime soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, Council and Planning Board, for hosting this evening. Portsmouth Listens, thank you for organizing this effort. My name is Ethan Underhill. I've lived here for 6 months. That's probably why Group D set me forth as tribute to speak to you all. Just kidding. It's a privilege to be here, and it's a privilege to speak on behalf of Group D. Who is Group D? It's a team of 12 from around town who can help tell the story of Portsmouth and where it's going. With our diversity comes a diversity of professional and personal experiences. From the beginning, we saw those differences as a source of strength. And one thing that we shared was our love of coloring outside the lines, which is how we ended up not with a problem statement, but with a vision statement. And as we look at the state of housing in Portsmouth, next slide, please. Thank you. As we look at the state of housing in Portsmouth, we see both challenges and opportunities. That's how we landed on that vision statement. Indeed, we see that lack of housing inventory, lack of diversity of units, rising prices and rents, stubborn interest rates, in general, high barriers to entry for those who would like to enter the market and cannot. As Daniel Paralek and Group B just mentioned, that shrinking, missing middle class. In the short term, we have to respond to these challenges with urgency. As we do that, though, in the long term, we have an opportunity here to consider what housing and therefore what life in Portsmouth can look like in 10, 25, 100 years from now. So taking that longer view, in our opinion, can help Portsmouth continue to live its values of radical welcoming, environmental sustainability, financial stewardship, and leadership by example. So what did we find? We found 3 needs that the city needs to keep in mind. Number 1, increase housing stock throughout the city. This is obvious, but it's worth repeating. 50% of residents here rent their home. There is nothing inherently wrong with that, but if you polled those people, I'm relatively certain that the majority would say that they would like to own if given the chance. That makes the data point that 55% of residents not being able to afford a home in town that much more compelling. So quite simply, we should try to fix that with more cost-effective options. Need number 2, more knowledge of zoning regulations. Zoning is often either too quick of a solution or too complex of an issue to try to comprehend and engage with, so we would all be better off with a more comprehensive understanding of what's actually in that 346 pages of city ordinance. And number 3, zooming out a little bit, more collaboration with surrounding communities. Portsmouth is not the only municipality navigating a housing choice challenge, so we should lean on our neighbors, especially in Rockingham, Stratford, York counties, to help solve these challenges. Next slide, please. As the city enters its next phase of strategic planning, Group D thinks that each of these needs could be converted into measurable goals. I don't think I need to read each of these goals. They speak to the needs pretty well, but we're talking about increasing the units, prioritizing these populations, utilizing underutilized property. Next slide, please. What can we do as a city to achieve these goals? One idea is to enhance enforcement of short-term rental closures where they're not legal in the city. While lucrative for owners, short-term rentals lower the supply for local long-term residents, so they're taking options off the table. Another suggestion to the zoning point, we can design and deliver what we're calling a Knowing Your Zoning educational series for the public. So these could be 90 to 120-minute trainings. They could be a booklet. My understanding is that's already in progress, so good for us. We came up with an idea that's already going. The planning department could also come up with some newsletters with recommendations of what we could do to make affordable housing even better in the city of Portsmouth. And again, in that long-term view, what areas of collaboration and joint problem solving can we explore together with our neighboring communities around housing, transportation, and environmental sustainability? We would like for our city government to keep a couple of things in mind. Number 1, never stop thinking about quality. Always push the conversation beyond strict costs and number of units. Number 2, prioritize environmental resilience. Climate change is happening. We must be ready for it. We must continue to be ready for it. Number 3, keep advocating in Concord. There is only so much Portsmouth can solve on its own, and more community members and businesses should continue to lobby for policies that would improve the lives of Portsmouth residents, like the city's right to mandate inclusionary zoning. Can't do that without state approval. Affordable housing minimums for new development, the pillow tax, and a $15 minimum wage. Next slide, please. In sum, we covered a lot of ground in Group D, and make no mistake, we did not see eye to eye on every issue. The most meaningful difference among us was the financial commitment it will take from each of us to solve Portsmouth's housing choice challenge. Some of us are concerned the City Council will raise taxes to address the issue of housing choice. Some of us are much more open to that if the right program is proposed. We were never under the impression we would resolve a debate as old as America itself over the course of 8 hours, but we did start to make some progress. And as we continue to navigate this challenge as one city, we just ask that you please continue to consult your electorate. So thank you again, Council and Board, for hosting this evening. Thank you, Group D, for the productive disagreement. We need more of it. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Pickett, and I am the representative of Group E. We are obviously the funnest group, exceptional, energized, engaged, and we were. I personally wear a lot of hats, although I really want to make sure that you know I am representing Group E and the ideas we shared and brought to the table together. But just to add a touch of that personal, I am currently navigating this housing crisis and about to step from Section 8 recipient into that missing middle ground where I no longer have that safety net. So this is an emotional, it's a personal struggle for a lot of us, and I just want to bring that to the conversation. Our group was 9 Portsmouth residents. We were really 50-50 on renters and owners, which I thought was pretty exceptional because that's also representative of the city itself, 50-50 renters and owners. We were ranging in ages from 30s to 70s. We were still engaged in professions, and some of us were retirees. And we were spread throughout the city. Nobody lived next door, so a lot of us were talking for the first time about these issues. I do want to say that the communication we had was pivotal. I think we came in with differences, and and we shared with authenticity, vulnerability, and connection. We were able to talk about how there's a sense of loneliness as we watch people we love and care about have to migrate out of the city. We spoke about feeling like there's a lack of control regarding where we live. Maybe we have a home, but isn't the right fit for us, but we can't move because there's not availability. And we spoke about watching changes happen over the past 4 decades, and some of them being wonderful changes, and then some of them being changes that we hope to address through these conversations. Thank you. The problem statements. So we felt that there is a failure to address the housing demands of a socioeconomically diverse population. So we have housing, we're building housing all the time. We know that there is housing on the horizon, but it needs to be housing that meets the needs of more than one type of income, so that we can retain the diversity in the city, in professions, in ages, in socioeconomic demographics. There's an urgent need for a clear pathway and action. We say the word urgent several times, and I think we want to convey urgency, that action needs to follow these conversations. Renters with mid to low incomes are the most acutely burdened. There is housing for people at the lowest end through the Housing Authority. We have 660 some odd units of affordable housing, but there's not some place for those people to move up, which means that that's a clogged pipeline. And there's a moral imperative to enable people who work here to live here. And I just wanted to add that it's not just a moral, but it's a practical imperative to have people who work in the city live in the city, so that they want to stay and provide their services and exchange commerce within the city. Thank you. The top needs, again, housing solutions for all income and occupations, and all housing needs as well. So renters and people who would like to own, a first-time homeowner, somebody who wants to downsize, somebody who wants to move into their next step. Diverse stakeholder voices, so parts of the planning process and the decision-making should come from developers, landowners, business owners, and residents. So making sure that everyone who should be at the table is coming to the table. Community-wide support for urgent action and changes. It's bigger than any one neighborhood. I think that the model of the communication that we had, where we came in with different ideas and we shared them and we really bonded over an understanding of the problem, it's a model that I think could be repeated. So that bears some weight. Considerations for the city. This goes back to transparency and action, document and publicize a pathway for housing. So to take the information that you're learning and to really point out what exactly is actionable and how it can get to the next steps and make it so that the community and constituency can follow along with the actions that are being taken, and then monitor the progress as it moves along so that we can feel a sense of accomplishment as we maybe see more ADUs coming into the housing stock or changes in zoning. And speaking of zoning, to prioritize zoning changes to create solutions such as enabling multifamily housing in single-family neighborhoods. Leveraging city resources and available funding grants, including federal revitalization programs. We did highlight a couple of those. For instance, the Chapter 79E, which is being used in surrounding communities. And can it be used here? It's a program from the federal government that allows a city to sort of adopt certain areas and state that they fall under this program, and if you're developing there for the purpose of improving on a need that the city has and keeping a historical tie, you can not have to pay taxes on that building for 11 years. And then there is the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs and their Invest New Hampshire program with their capital grant that increases capacity and fills gaps made by inflation, supply, demand, et cetera, and has quite a bit of money that it can share with communities to subsidize building affordable housing. The municipal per unit program, which if you are building affordable housing, offers a unrestricted $10,000 per unit of affordable housing, and a planning and zoning grant also by Invest New Hampshire, which offers funding to analyze and update land use regulations. In summary, Group E, again, we represent 50-50 rent and own, renters and owners. We emphasize that housing really truly is a crisis and it urgently demands action. We hope that the civic engagement that's happening here will continue. And in fact, we talked about maintaining this group of people and the contacts that we've formed because we're civically engaged and we are in support of affordable housing. So how can we draw this voice back into the conversation at key moments? Is there a way to retain contacts and disperse that information at key times? We respect the complexity of this issue, and we respect the complexity of the decisions that are made by the council and the zoning board. We know that it's not a flat answer that's going to happen, but we want to continue to be part of that answer and find an answer because we believe it's possible. And we conclude that neighbors who know each other discover more in common than not and are less likely to fight change. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Allison Tanner, and I'm representing Group F. So we had an average of 6 to 9 people attending our morning Zoom meetings. We were not very diverse in age. We were 50 plus. Most of us were single-family homeowners, although we did have one renter in our group. But we did have a diversity of places that we lived in the city and also in the number of years that we've lived here, from 2 to 45 years. So the problem statement for us is 21st century market forces have created an ongoing shortage of affordable workforce in mid-level housing. So one of the things that we looked at was the best neighborhoods in Portsmouth, and according to Realtor.com, South End, Downtown, and West End were the best neighborhoods. And what defines a great neighborhood is listed in the characteristics below, and it basically boils down to walkable 15-minute neighborhoods. So you have everything in close proximity. You don't necessarily need a car. Next slide. What we need to do is to improve housing capacity, the diversity of the types of houses that we have, and the interconnectedness between communities. So you can see all the different types of housing that we should think about. And the other thing that we have to concentrate on is public transit to connect housing to jobs. Next slide. So the top needs to improve housing diversity and interconnectedness, marketing and messaging, nurture attitudes that value and invest in all forms of community diversity. Increase connectivity, connect people to jobs, and people to services for all forms of mobility. Connect neighboring communities. So solutions are close at hand. We have at least 3 public transit options here. We've got the UNH Wildcat, the Coast, and C&J, and maybe we could work with them to help increase the connectedness throughout the city. Next. And one thing that we feel needs to change is an administrative attitude of yes, that yes, we can do this. So actions that foster and facilitate diverse housing options, the council should consider ordinance and property tax revisions that facilitate diverse housing opportunities. The staff should proactive public outreach and education in reference to housing designs and options, including funding opportunities. And take a regional approach to housing and public transit. Next slide. So again, open the door to actions that foster and facilitate diverse housing options. Citywide, expand and develop systems and programs that increase access and connectedness for all forms of mobility between neighbors and neighborhoods. Educate residents to understand all varieties of need, to foster empathy and enable motivation for change. We need to change the not in my backyard attitude that's seen. And then make Portsmouth a leader in planning regional housing and transportation solutions with partners. As others have said, this is not isolated to the city of Portsmouth. It is a regional problem, and we need to address it regionally. Next slide. So in summary, many topics identified here are not novel, as everyone else has said. But what we need to do is to take advantage of rich best practices of our neighboring communities and their regional and national examples as well. Use existing city ordinances and resources while changes are developed. Build stronger alliances and relationships within the Seacoast region. Avoid assumptions, develop the attitude of yes. And start by picking low-hanging fruit. So recently there have a couple of things have happened. In Kittery, they have developed a grant program where people that are going to build ADUs get $75,000 in a grant that they can then, if they accept low-income housing vouchers, that they're able to move forward with. And Dover worked with a developer to build a community of cottages, tiny homes, in the city of Portsmouth, in the city of Dover. And it could be done here in Portsmouth as well. And then Portsmouth can live up to the motto of City of the Open Door. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Deborah Horning. I'm representing Group G. We are the participants of Group G, and we were about 7 to 8 people. on any given meeting day between the ages of 60 and 85 years old. Many of us have lived in other states and other countries, bringing those perspectives to our discussions, but each of us are currently residing in a variety of Portsmouth neighborhoods and work in various places in the city, in various professions. Next slide, please. As we all know, Portsmouth is an attractive place to live, and housing demand is high. There are not enough diverse housing options in terms of type and price in the city for people to live and work here. Additionally, the city has very few resources of funding, essentially just property taxes, and no control over prices and rents. We feel that an increased stock are our top needs of a variety of housing options that should be a priority in terms of cost, sizes, and types for renters in particular. We would like to see a more extensive public transportation system put into place to serve the gateway corridors and outlying communities. Next slide. For the considerations for the city, we would like the city to consider rezoning certain areas where it's possible to create more affordable options. For instance, rezoning from single-family to multifamily housing, commercial to residential, and allowing for the boarding house model. We'd like for the city to consider incentivizing the business community to engage in solutions to create workforce housing specifically for employees. For instance, in Pease, where there is such a wide variety of businesses and a lot of land to be built on, and the medical communities in that area as well. For our actions for housing choices, we would like the city to encourage weatherization and energy efficiencies for existing properties, particularly in the rental market. If there is to be an increased density in Portsmouth, it is our concern that sustainability and climate protection practices be adhered to in all actions. And our additional thoughts on the next slide here, we wonder if there is a limit to growth here in Portsmouth. We feel that there is a need to have an evaluation and conversation about the bigger picture, including, but not limited to, infrastructure, capacity, and needs. Wages and New Hampshire's low minimum wage is of significant concern, and one that needs to be part of the conversation regarding availability and costs of rental prices, something that Concord needs to address. And for our final thoughts, we appreciate participating in the study circles. We don't want more conversation. We don't want that large stack to get any bigger. We would like action taken as soon as possible. We would like the people to be heard. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Linda Daly, and I am privileged to represent Group H, and we appreciate this opportunity to speak to you all and share our findings. We were a small group, 4 passionate and engaged women, Goldens, young in spirit, a mix of working and business owners as well as retired. And one of our members has been around for 40 plus years, a wealth of information on the history, and I am a recent transplant to the area. Next, please. So our problem statement from the beginning has always been that there is a lack of affordable housing for both middle and low income individuals and families. And we believe that there's really 3 causes for that. The first are market forces, as we've heard. It's a variable, desirable town. People are moving here from out of sight. They're out of state. They're driving up the prices. And in the game of musical chairs, when the music stops, the low and middle are priced out of the market. Second, we've heard this from other groups, zoning and regulations are a real barrier. Councilor Bagley noted in an article published today that Dillon's law restricts cities' authority to mandate affordable workforce housing. That's a real issue, and we need to change that, as well as other zoning restrictions. And finally, NIMBY. There are too many naysayers that are showing up to the planning board meetings. We need to get the yay-sayers to show up, to say yes to having workforce housing in their own backyard. Next. So in terms of the top needs, we believe, again, that middle and low-income housing should be the priority. I think Portsmouth Housing Authority does an amazing job, and the new Ruth Lewin Griffin Workforce Housing is amazing, but they can only do so much, and we need to engage others in making middle-income housing available in the city. We envision more mixed use and mixed income development housing. I was excited to hear about the proposal for the Christmas tree project, but was surprised and disappointed that there was no affordable workforce housing as part of that, and I feel like that's a real missed opportunity, and hope that that can be something to be addressed before that is approved. And as many others have mentioned, we can't talk about housing without talking about transportation. We'd love to see some gondolas throughout town to get people around, maybe bring some more tourists to town. Next. So in terms of our goals, first and foremost, we want to provide housing for the people who make Portsmouth vibrant, authentic, safe, and diverse. And I failed to mention on the problem slide that the impact of this housing is that our chefs that make our downtown so vibrant can't afford to live here. The people that are teaching our young children, young families, our seniors. And so I think we can all agree that we want those people living in our community. And we value the vibrancy, the authenticity, the safety, and the diversity of this community, and we need to continue to make sure that we have housing for them. We also envision multi-generational income use developments in neighborhoods. All four of us are fortunate to live in neighborhoods where there is multi-generational and multi-income renting single-family homes. We think that's a great model. We all value it, and we'd love to see that develop more so. As I drive around Portsmouth and I look at the new developments, they're all high-end. And why can't we have seniors and the workforce and the rest of us all living in the same communities? It would only enrich all of us to do that. And in terms of the third priority in preserving the arts, culture, and the history of Portsmouth, which we all value, that really can't happen unless we accomplish the first two goals. Next. So in terms of considerations, a couple of thoughts. One, we want to incentivize home sharing. There are a lot of seniors that are living in big homes that want to stay there. Their taxes are exorbitant, and there may be some ways to have some tenants that can help them stay there. There's been a lot of chat about zoning barriers. I don't need to dwell on that, but duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, we need to find ways to get beyond the single-family home in Portsmouth. Another group mentioned the 44 tiny homes, workforce housing that's over in Dover. We used to benefit from housing provided by employers, and no longer, that just doesn't happen. And so it's exciting to see what's happening in Dover, and it would be great to see that happen here in Portsmouth. And finally, we've talked about NIMBY, it's an issue. I think there needs to be a lot more grassroots communication, and let's talk about, the people that you don't want in your backyard are actually real people that you might actually want to have as part of your friend group. So in terms of considerations, additional thoughts, Spokane has been a real model for middle housing development in Washington State, and I loved their kind of philosophy, which is they chose an outcome over process. And I think the planning profession in general is very process oriented, and it needs to be. But at some point, you need to choose what that outcome is going to be. They chose middle housing. They gave themselves a year to figure it out, and they made a plan. So outcomes over process. The other things that we think that are important for this are collaboration. The city can't do this alone. You need the builders, you need the non-profit organizations to make this happen. The communication with the community is key. Compassion. Housing insecurity is real in Portsmouth. but it's hidden and people don't see it. And I think people need to understand that. Just as an aside, I'm on the Women's Giving Circle this year on the board, and our issue is housing insecurity, and we plan to give over $100,000 to organizations that are doing that work, and we could probably give away $500,000 and not meet the need. It's a real need, and people need to understand it, and we need to engage the community. So the summary is what you've heard from some other groups. Commend the city. There's been so much great research. I think the master plan is a beautiful report. But I think now is the time for action. We know what needs to get done. It's easy for me to say as an outsider, I don't understand what it takes, but I would just love for us to just put some stakes in the ground. 20% is in the plan, 80% is the implementation. This is a really critical and timely issue, and I just thank you all for giving us this opportunity to contribute to this important process. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bill Maddox. I'm the facilitator for Group I. None of our group members were able to make it tonight, so I'm presenting for them. So our group was, as I just said, 5 people. We had 10 originally, and 5 didn't make it in the beginning, but the 5 that did attended all the meetings and really did a lot of great work. 5 folks were in their 70s, all of them professionals, 1 renter, 2 condo owners, 2 single-family owners from the West End, downtown, Christian Shores, Sagamore Creek, and Pheasant Lane. So kind of a fundamental question that our group encountered very early on was, who gets to live in Portsmouth today and tomorrow? The ability of seniors to stay in their homes is a real issue for people. Affordability is important for all income levels to live here, not just low-income folks. Renting is unaffordable and ownership is unattainable. Demand far exceeds supply. Clearly, much of the current housing situation in Portsmouth is a result of zoning. Current zoning has been an invitation to developers to build developments that have dramatically changed city landscapes, particularly downtown and in the North End. These developments have been mostly focused on building upscale hotels, high-end condos, and market-rate apartments. Few projects were built with low and moderate income residents in mind. Developers cite high costs of land and construction as reasons more affordable units haven't been built, and it's been up to the city and the Portsmouth Housing Authority to step up and develop affordable and workforce housing, but little progress has been made. So for top needs, our group identified a master plan that emphasizes housing, provides subsidized housing for targeted groups such as teachers, firefighters, police. Transportation implications must be addressed. That's a really serious issue for anybody in the community, and obviously for lower income people is a real issue. And preserve what makes Portsmouth special. When updating the master plan, focus on housing, including the implementation of inclusionary zoning as a tool to make affordable housing a standard requirement of new developments. Also include the needs of expanded public transportation, necessary infrastructure, and preservation of open space and recreation areas. Some of the considerations our group came up with was to look for cooperative regional solutions to housing challenges. We know that this is not just a Portsmouth issue. This is an issue affecting the entire state and the entire nation, so we really have to look to other communities to help us find solutions. There's a real need for demographic analysis to project housing needs. Talk about that more in a minute. We need more walkable neighborhoods like Portsmouth Green, the Cinemagic McKinnon area, or West End or Yokins. Zoning must allow greater density in existing housing stock, ADUs, boarding houses, rentals, duplexes. We need to conduct a comprehensive demographic study to better understand what certain income groups cannot afford, certain income groups cannot afford to live in Portsmouth. Streamline the permitting process to build ADUs as well as for larger development projects. Minimize the red tape and approval delays. really kind of cut through a lot of the bureaucracy that has been holding back development for low and moderate income and workforce housing. Encourage existing homeowners to create ADUs, convert underoccupied single families into duplexes, or consider renting out unused rooms. A lot of common themes with the other groups. Other considerations: explore regional cooperation, expand housing and transportation development, which I already kind of mentioned. Adjust zoning, encourage walkable housing clusters, encourage housing mix of rentals and ownership, providing a path for transition from renting to owning property, desirable to promote home ownership. We want people to be able to feel like they can live here. If they're a renter, we want them to be a homeowner at some point in their life here. Work with surrounding towns, as I've already said, to adopt a regional approach to housing, which includes the need for more public transportation options, build more walkable developments, and revise city zoning ordinances and regulations to promote affordable housing. Other considerations: expand and publicize programs such as the tax deferral and abatement to support low and middle income population who are pinched by rising taxes, water and sewer rates, and the cost of living. Promote regional cooperation to enhance housing and transportation development and preserve the character of existing communities. One idea was to consider offering a housing stipend to public servants, such as firefighters, police, and teachers. Create and expand city-run programs to assist seniors so they can stay in their homes, and first-time homebuyers with down payment assistance. Partner with the Portsmouth Housing Authority to build projects on city-owned properties, such as the recently completed Griffin Apartments near the fire station and the Sherburne School project. Explore development opportunities in local underutilized properties like the Box Run Mall. So in summary, the problem of shelter is global in nature and goes beyond the housing issue. There are many factors that drive the idea of affordable housing. It is more complex than what can be solved by Portsmouth alone. We appreciate this opportunity to voice our concerns, and we'll have more details in our full report. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Megan Corsetti, and I have the honor of presenting on behalf of Group J. Next slide. So Group J was comprised of some very dedicated and engaged citizens. We all were sharing common goals of listening, learning, and ultimately finding realistic solutions to address housing in our communities. We had 11 participants. We were kind of diverse, 30s to 70s. All of us are Portsmouth residents. We are professionals, parents, volunteers, retirees, etc. And I think that we covered most Portsmouth neighborhoods. So good perspectives. Next slide. With our problem statement, much like many of the other problem statements we've heard here tonight, Portsmouth is a highly desirable place to visit and live, but only one of it is considered developable, which would be considered available and attainable to be used for housing. So we were thinking, what factors should be taken into consideration to maximize both our public and private development or redevelopment to ensure that individuals and families earning less than or equal to the 120% of AMI, as well as seniors looking to downsize or age in place, could do that here in Portsmouth. Next slide. So our group identified these three top needs. Number one being that we really need to improve the accessibility within and into Portsmouth, shifting to a regional approach for the housing crisis. We need to continue to increase availability of housing options, but keep in mind that we do have limited green space in our community for development in Portsmouth, and we have other needs that need to be balanced, such as open space, sports facility needs, outdoor recreation, etc. We need to continue to look both for public and private opportunities to develop programs and solutions to assure that housing is attainable to those making 120% of AMI or less, and making sure that there's housing also for those residents who want to age in place. We noted that there were very few starter homes and fixer-uppers, and really just limited options for our seniors. Next slide. So our goals that we would like you to consider is to engage and partner with our neighboring communities to pursue a mutually beneficial regional and local transit system. Housing, as many of my other learning teams people have said, is a regional issue, it's a national issue, and so transportation can help kind of close that gap for us. We also should be looking into implementing a systemic approach to housing. So looking at the availability of transportation, access to amenities based on where that housing is, and also consider the impact on our infrastructure as well as environmental concerns. We really want to make sure that as we move forward in our community, we're creating a sustainable, connected, and safe place to live. We also want to ensure that housing solutions benefit both the current residents and future residents. We have to make sure that the history and culture of Portsmouth remains part of what it is, and also, again, just really focusing on sustainability and connection. Next slide. So one of our actions that we would recommend is aggressively pursuing and expanding our regional transportation services outside of Portsmouth with surrounding communities. We saw that from some of our participants in other areas where they lived, they found huge benefits of those mass transit type situations. We also noted that our neighboring state of Massachusetts has been focusing development along a rail. So that was serving as a direct line into the city and connecting the community a little bit bigger. Our next action is to also look at value engineering of existing PHA properties to assure maximum efficiency and density, and that's stated in the master plan and the PHA studies. So just ensuring that we continue forward with that. We also are recommending that we continue to develop regulations to foster diverse populations with different types of housing and density of housing, such as the ADUs, which you have already done some great work on, conversion of vacant commercial zones into residential properties, and other ideas that can come up. And this really would look different based on where in Portsmouth we're targeting. Next slide. So something that we want to make sure isn't forgotten is that there is a scarcity of developable land remaining in Portsmouth, and it was noted that there's only 1% of public land able to be developed or used for other needs. We also want to make sure that we are kind of staying for the course with the current workforce housing incentives. So when people are getting their conditional use permits and they're granted these things for workforce housing as the incentive, we want to make sure that it's enforced and not able to be reversed later in that process. The group as a whole really, much like many of the other groups have shared, we're just amazed that the same study conversations kind of came up with some of the same barriers and limitations and also some of the same solutions. So we really hope to see some action with measurable, quantifiable, and targeted goals so we can kind of measure our progress as a community. Next slide. So in summary, this is a really complex problem, and it's going to require a complex solution. We found that this study circle was a really positive experience for all of our participants. We enjoyed collaborating with other members of the community, learning from one another, and working together. Our group is really looking for transparency and a consistent commitment over time from the City Council to demonstrate a commitment to realistic housing solutions. And we hope that the City Council and Planning Board will take into consideration the research, time, and thoughtful deliberation that has gone into this study circle by all of the citizens of Portsmouth that are here. So thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robert White. I'm a resident of Union Street, and I've lived in Portsmouth for about 6 years. We had 5 of us in our group. We had a little attrition, and we were a fairly tight, basically a middle-aged group of working and retired. And I think that I'll just give you an example of our first conversation about, as we each sort of brought to the table in a frank conversation about what we might try to do in this process. And so I'll give you an example of the breadth of opinions. One person said basically a conversation about Portsmouth and affordable workforce housing is basically a useless conversation in that it had to be addressed at a regional level. Another person said, give me a month and I could show how we could basically double the population of Portsmouth, and you'd never see it. So that's the ground that we had to cover, and it was a very fascinating group. None of them are here. I wish that they had the opportunity to hear amazing lessons of this group. I feel like I've been on a vertical learning curve even in the past 45 minutes going through. So this has been really wonderful. So I'm going to try not to repeat stuff that has been really very nicely said, but I think we really came down to that both looking at Portsmouth's tradition and history is that the neighborhoods of Portsmouth have historically, our historical foundation is diverse neighborhoods of which there's enormous housing opportunities that has served the population of the city for a very long time, until recent history. And so we think that sort of reaffirming that, in the same way that we reaffirm the historic character of the city, is the historic character of our neighborhood's ability to be accommodating to a wider variety of housing than one would think upon just driving around town. And so that was a really important part of it. We really felt like public policy for the city should really address the close sort of subsets of affordable and workforce housing, because basically the market is sort of overwhelming everything else. This is our work for what to do. On the other hand, you know, the conversation about that, you know, what is it? All boats rise in a rising sea, which is maybe a bad metaphor right in our current era with our rising seas in Portsmouth. But there's a positive side to that bringing up great, you know, more opportunities for across the whole spectrum of housing in Portsmouth is also an important thing to remember. We can't just close the doors and say, well, we're just not going to build anymore. And it's an interesting contradiction because many of us have heard on different occasions, well, Portsmouth is basically built out. It's a bit of an urban legend or an urban myth, because we actually do have a lot of opportunities. We also, within our group, in light of Rising Seas, we had a very strong voice about a future of resilience, energy, in the nature of housing in our neighborhoods as a whole, and not to forget that in the process of trying to achieve housing for you know, in the workforce and affordable components. So we really want action, and that's been said a number of times here. And I think there are several things that we really saw were really important components. And I'm going to I think we really felt like, in some ways, we are our own worst enemies, and that the sort of fairly difficult challenges with NIMBYism through the neighborhoods is we're basically preventing our future by having, you know, by letting that be the only voice, the voice in opposition to a future. And I think, you can go to the next one here. What we really felt like was there is a wealth of information. It's very hard to find it, actually. And even though many of us have participated in workshops like this in the past, processes like this in the past, there isn't a repository, a place. There isn't a bookshelf in the library. You know, maybe we could have a bookshelf in the library where recordings of, you know, Smart Growth Portsmouth lectures that we've had. We've had national and international authorities on urban planning, housing, green space, resilience come to our city. Most residents in the city who have participated in that should get an honorary master's degree in resilient urban planning for all the information that we've received. But now you can't go back and find something that we might have heard 4 or 5 years ago. But it's all been told to us. So, so that part of that is just let's get the information better together and more available. And I think the other part that we really came out would be really as a strong piece is we can go and make changes to regulations, but we don't have a vision of positive housing in our city right now. It's not a positive view. And so fashioning a constructive, positive, affirmative view of what housing in our neighborhoods across our city, with particular emphasis on the specific needs that we've had of affordable and workforce, aging population, young population. There's a series of sort of subsets of housing that we really need to better articulate what's going on for those folks and what are the housing responses that we might do. So we call it a vision plan. Before we regulate, we must know what we're going to regulate for and what are our goals and objectives to do that, and have a very articulate and creative view of how to do that. Next slide.
Fantastic.
So we like basically going at some of the city policies regarding incentives. Our current density bonuses for affordable housing do not match up with the price difference between affordable and market rate housing. That delta is like 200 to 300%. Our density bonus is 25%. So we're not in alignment with making the incentive to developers to be able to have a really constructive conversation about what it would cost them to develop affordable units as opposed to market rate units. And we're not offering enough of an incentive to do that. Keep going. So just in closing, I think, I tried not to repeat a lot of what has been said here previously, but I think we are eager for the information and the vision to really be what we translate as our next steps. We can't go at revising zoning unless we really know what we're trying to do in our process of bringing more housing to the city, making that possible, encouraging that, and having it be embraced by the people who live here. So on that, thank you.
Greetings, City Council, city staff, and my fellow listeners. My name is Dagan Migardich, and I am the co-founder of Liars Bench Beer Company here in Portsmouth. As a small business owner, I am intimately familiar with our workforce and their housing struggles. Frankly, my business would not exist if I had not been the beneficiary of affordable living here in the city. But tonight, I'm here on behalf of Group L. Group L was 10 people in number, all residents ranging from 29 to 77, all clustered either in the 29 to 42 and 65 to 77 ranges. We were mostly college educated, retired and working professionals spanning a variety of industries, from education social work to tech, IP to engineering, the arts to small business ownership. We were 50-50 male-female, all white. No one in the group had infants, toddlers, nor school-aged children, and we had good representation from the various Portsmouth neighborhoods. Most of us were homeowners, but there was a handful of renters as well. Our problem statement, stop me if you've heard this before. The character and economic health of the city is increasingly jeopardized by rising housing and living costs that are squeezing out or excluding all but the most fortunate. Current and past efforts to steer development towards more equitable outcomes have been woefully inadequate. Our top needs, housing options for low to middle income residents. And it should be noted here that this need is plagiarized word for word from the housing goals stated in the 2015 master plan. We need accommodations for current or prospective residents who are being priced out. How do we keep people who are living here? And how do we remain the city of the open door? We also need the political will to make effective and lasting changes. And on behalf of Group L, and I assume everybody here in this room, we hope that that is both the intention and the outcome of these sessions. Goals for housing choices. Preservation without strangulation, which is to say that we can honor our history and still address and adapt zoning, permitting, and state impediments to the development of affordable housing. To resolve issues of supply and affordability, we need to broaden incentives for individuals and increase collaboration with organizations like the Portsmouth Housing Authority. Portsmouth should also create effective marketing materials and diagnostic tools that articulate the problem and educate the populace. Our actions. Honoring our history and creating housing opportunities for all are not conflicting goals. Affordability is a part of our history. Look no further than our neighborhoods. We should develop pre-approved blueprints for affordable housing based on historical precedent, think Atlantic Heights, that can be fast-tracked through the permitting process. We should ease restrictions on ADUs and continue to do so as we have done, as well as aging in place accommodations so that residents who have built a life here can continue to be residents. If developers are unswayed by incentives, let's create incentives for individuals. An example, could we adopt a conservation land trust model and apply it to a community housing trust, whereby larger homes can be donated to be used as future sites of affordable housing? Past successes, like the Ruth Griffin House, should be championed, and we should collaborate on more demonstration projects that not only provide but destigmatize workforce housing. And then back to political will. Portsmouth should create and disseminate narrative-driven marketing materials that explain the challenges and limitations of our housing crisis, as well as tools that diagnose the ever-evolving nature of the problem. Our additional thoughts: we see discouraging redundancies between what was expressed in the 2017 listening sessions and this current round. Many of the priorities in the 2015 master plan, such as green spaces and accessibilities, have seen tangible progress, but housing successes are much fewer in number and much slower in pace. Current incentives do not appear to be compelling to developers, and the city lacks the teeth to enforce workforce or affordability requirements. This is where marketing the problem is essential. Residents are mostly ignorant of the limitations Concord puts on the city of Portsmouth and how those limitations stymie the goals being discussed here today. While much of the discussion centers on workforce housing and starter family housing, there is little discussion of the needs of the unhoused and the homeless, a population that is growing at an alarming rate both locally and nationally. Overall, Group L was impressed at the degree of consensus amongst our members. While participants brought their own personal concerns, there was a shared empathy for community members struggling to find or maintain adequate housing that only deepened as the sessions continued. All of us were alarmed by this trend's impact on our community and our inability to steer development towards more equitable, attainable outcomes. Now is the time to address this crisis with the sincerity and conviction that it warrants. As history has shown us, if we continue on our current trajectory, affordability will come to Portsmouth. But what will be left of our city when it does? Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Emily Tuzin.
I'm Elizabeth Wolf.
And we are here representing Group M. Group M was diverse in age range, from people in their 20s to seniors. Our group contained longstanding residents and new arrivals to Portsmouth, residents from many different neighborhoods throughout the city, and most importantly, there were renters and homeowners, and Elizabeth and I are representing the renters tonight. We were 10-ish people who met in person. Our problem statement is in two parts. The first part is pretty widely agreed upon and well supported by the research we read in the study guide, that there is not enough affordable, below market rate housing to support our economically diverse community here in Portsmouth. And the second part of our problem is that there has been very little concrete action taken, and it's time to kind of put our money where our mouth is.
Oh, sorry, that's me. Okay, so top needs, we divided the most essential needs into three basic groups. First, we wanted to emphasize the urgency. Build now. We need below market rate housing as soon as possible. The second is a strategy on zoning. We had some good discussions about what it would look like to have upzoning in our communities, and civic engagement. One of the questions that we repeatedly came back to is, why are we here? Why are we discussing this problem? We knew from a member in our group that there's been some form of study on the housing question at a rate of almost one per year for the past 20 years. And the problem is worse than ever. And so we spent a bit of time discussing why that is and how we can better get everyone's voices at the table.
So our goals are also divided into the same three topics. The Build Now goal is pretty straightforward. It's a pretty modest and reasonable goal, we think, for new construction for the next 5 years. The zoning strategy, we would like to incentivize smaller scale private housing developments throughout the city, make it easier to develop housing that supports goals for affordability and accessibility, and incentivize housing near public transportation. Some actions that could support this would be eliminating single-family zoning, allowing incremental increases in density across all residential zoning areas, upzoning, as Elizabeth mentioned, allowing mixed uses in residential zoning areas, eliminating parking requirements for new housing developments, and zoning for higher density, especially near public transportation. And then our third category, civic engagement. We want to improve engagement with economically diverse residents, especially renters.
Okay. So for specific actions, next slide, please. Build now. One thing that we strongly recommend is approve the Sherburne project, and then immediately begin work on the next one. Emily enumerated our various zoning recommendations, and for civic engagement, so talking about how we got here and why we're still here, one of the issues is that city council is quite volatile. It's a 2-year term, everyone gets elected or unelected at the same time. So we talked about considering 3-year staggered terms so that it allows the council to have a more long-term vision rather than dealing with the thing that's on fire right then. Another thing that we talked a lot about is the fact that renters make up half of the city, and yet their voices are not at the table. A lot of time has been spent in this room talking about workforce housing and talking about service workers who can't live in the city. Most of the time, these people aren't even in the room. I'm one of these people. I'm a renter, and I'm barely making my rent. This is incredibly personal to me. But for most of the time, right, how many of you are renters? That's about what I expected. So, one of our recommendations is that the Portsmouth City Council no longer be entirely at large, and that we move to a both mixed representative and at-large system where the wards are represented. This would at least increase the odds that different parts of the city are represented more equitably. I would like to point out that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in her dissent on the overturning of the Voters' Rights Act, she identified at-large elections as a method that is used to exclude minority groups. And the research also shows that this type of election further consolidates power into the hands of the wealthy. And we feel that if Portsmouth considers adjusting this for more fair representation, we can move forward more consistently on these important issues because the people who are most directly affected will be at the table. And back to Emily.
So additional thoughts on housing. It's the next slide here. As we've said over and over, renters are 50% of Portsmouth. We're showing up for Portsmouth Listens, underrepresented in local government, and I would say underutilized as well. We should be leveraged to help support affordable housing initiatives. All ages are affected indiscriminately by this housing crisis, and there are renters and homeowners at all ages. And we also recognize the need to preserve the character of Portsmouth. I was joking, I grew up on Cape Cod. I get it. It has to look a certain way and be historical and be beautiful. And it doesn't need to be an either or. It can be a both and. We have affordable housing and character in the community.
Nice. Yeah. In summary, you all know that this is a critical issue. You know the various related issues that happen because of the lack of affordable housing. You also all know this city council, every single one of you ran on housing. Every single one of you was reelected. You do not lack political capital. The city has said loud and clear that we want you to take bold action. You don't lack the capital. We need you to have the political will. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Scott Fales. I live on Aldrich Road, and I'm representing Group N tonight. The members of Group N worked very hard. They were very diligent, and the fruits of that labor are before you tonight in this presentation. I'm not planning to read the PowerPoint presentation verbatim because it's somewhat redundant, and all the other groups have actually voiced similar talking points. And I invite you to explore, the next slides on the group. And because I volunteered to stand at the podium tonight, I'm going to offer some of my thoughts and opinions and share something that I'm passionate about. The 2022 housing market study for the Portsmouth Housing Authority just blew me away. The information in this study is very impressive. And it should be required reading for everyone in this in attendance tonight, and I urge you to dive into it. Now, I'm not associated with Portsmouth Housing Authority, but I do believe in what they do, and I applaud their effort to create housing for people that need a home that they can afford. What a wonderful example of neighbors helping neighbors. But time is of the essence because the need is now. Portsmouth Housing is ready with new projects to provide the goods. In my opinion, the Sherburne Road project should be well underway by now, but it isn't. It took 6 years for the Ruth Griffin Place housing to be completed, and that's a shame. That's a long time to complete something like that. Delays cause hardship. People are facing cost burdens because of high rents or having to commute from neighboring towns. Think of the impact caused by commuters riding alone in their vehicles, the effect on the environment, the congestion, the noise, the parking problems, the added expense. Remember those billboards you see in bigger cities while driving that read, if you lived here, you'd be home by now? A lot of folks want to live here. I'm convinced that Portsmouth will attract construction of market price housing. And we see reports in the local news all the time, and it's almost organic. It's going to happen. Portsmouth is a destination. But I invite you to consider what could be. What if Portsmouth can knock down the silos and partner with Greenland, Newington, and Rye and for a regional solution to expand housing? What if Portsmouth offered an incentive to developers to allow 1 or 2 more stories to a multi-unit project if 10% of those units are committed to be affordable for the 50 to 80% AMI bracket into perpetuity? What if the city lobbied the state of New Hampshire to keep more of the meals and room tax dollars to build housing? It only makes sense. We have so many hospitality jobs, but the workforce can't afford to live here. What if the city gave Portsmouth Housing Authority one of the parking lots on Parrott Avenue or the Masonic Temple lot or the lower lot at City Hall Complex or even the Bridge Street lot to allow construction of workforce housing with a couple of levels of underground parking for revenue and several stories of housing above? There are many ways to be creative with new housing, but we're repeating the same talking points that were expressed 7 years ago, and now is the time to act. The easiest thing to do right now is to get behind the Portsmouth Housing Authority, take off the handcuffs, and let them do what they do best, and create the housing that we need. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those report outs. I am going to turn it over to Howard, who is our housing navigator, to give us another little report out. And then we will be doing public comment.
So you have heard tonight many different themes. There's consistent themes. There's some new themes that have been broached and brought to the table. I want to remind, the purpose of this joint listening session was for the decision makers in City Hall to hear from the decision makers that are out in the private realm. I have spoken in brief. This is just an overview of what they see as the goals the city should pursue. What's going to be coming forward to the planning board and the city council is their more detailed written report. I have given the charge to the groups to cure one of the ails of previous reporting, and that has been a lack of actionable items. So when this group writes, they've expressed the goals, but they are going to write in their written report strategies, actions, things the city can understand they need to take action on. One of the issues in the 2017 report that was alluded to by Portsmouth Listens served a purpose at the time. It was aspirational. There are themes, as the public here tonight has presented, that remain true. But this written report is going to come forward with action items that we are going to start proceeding implementing on. So I wish to thank everybody that participated in this, but this is not the end of their participation. When we come forward and speak to the planning board and speak to the council on these actions, they are going to be encouraged and requested to come and to speak again and reinforce what you've heard here tonight. So again, thank you to everybody. There was a lot of people that came out and they spoke a lot about implementation and action. So what's going to happen next is that we're going to meet with the Housing Committee. We're going to start laying out an action plan, and we're going to start proceeding on getting things done. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Howard. So we're going to do public comment now. Feel free to do we have a sign up? We did not have a sign up. So feel free to just go up to the podium. Keep 3 minutes in your heart and head, ideally, so that we can hear as much of public comment as possible. So feel free to just head up to the podium if you'd like to speak. Any speakers? Okay, perfect. Just feel free to start a line right by the back bench. And just please make sure to state your name and your city of residence, which is assumed to be Portsmouth.
Yeah, so I'm Jordan Paulding. I've lived in Portsmouth for about 4 years now on Islington Street, right near downtown, part of the group with Dagan. And one thing that had come up that we weren't able to find an answer to was how Portsmouth tracks the workforce in Portsmouth. Not just how many workers we have, but how many of those workers actually live in Portsmouth. So an idea that I had come up with is at least putting some effort into creating tools to actually track how many of our service workers, how many of our municipal workers actually live and work in Portsmouth rather than live, say, in Dover or the surrounding communities and come in. Because if we're ultimately looking for a way to increase affordability for those types of workers, how do we know the efforts that we're making are contributing to making it more affordable for those types if we don't have a way to actually track that? If we do have something like that, it would be wonderful to have access to information like that, but as far as I'm aware, we don't have that. I was curious if anyone may be aware if that is something that we have.
I do not know off the top of my head, but what we can do is definitely wrap in Sean Clancy, who is our director, is the city economic developer. I know that he is working on some type of program to at least track our businesses and our small businesses and a CRM in that. So it should be something that we should be able to tie in through his office to see if we can pull some of that information. I don't believe it's a requirement of employers to share that information. So it really would be what employers or employees readily share.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Byron Matto. I wanted to make two main points. The first point, well, a little context. I think spending 15 years writing software has scrambled my brain, and so I can only think about things in a certain kind of way in some aspects. So apologies if this comes from that perspective. The one is the notion of an asymptote, which is something that approaches a line but never crosses it. Right now, we are in an asymptote. We have been doing this conversation for quite some time, and we are not crossing the line. So I hope that the members of the boards and the city council can be the magic that crosses that line. So I want to make that point. And the second is that I view the zoning ordinances, the laws of the city as the program. And the program is running. And what is being produced by the program is not the outcome that we desire. There is so much pain associated with the outcome of this current program. And so we need to rewrite the program. And that means the zoning rules, and all of the systems in place that have produced this outcome. I think, it's extremely valuable to build affordable housing, make use of the Portsmouth Housing Authority. And I don't mean this in any kind of negative respect on those efforts, but from a programming point of view, it's an anti-pattern. It's working against what the program is producing. And so that speaks again back to the program being the problem. So I just want to make that point. So those are the 2 points I wanted to make. And I wanted to thank my Group M. It was a fantastic discussion. So thank you to you all, and have a good night.
Thank you, Byron.
You hear some impatience in the room. Some of you were maybe on the city council in June of 2020 when COVID was happening, and seeing the urgency of the outdoor dining, I brought together basically a list of all the architects, engineers, designers in the city, and almost 40 of them showed up on 2 days' notice, worked for 7 days, and brought a proposal for outdoor dining to the city that was approved a week later. And we did it at no cost to the city. I want to offer this group again. We will do this to help to fashion a portfolio of how, let's call it a spectrum of housing opportunities for the city, and to do sort of a workshop format. There's a variety of formats that we could do it. We just need someone to say, yes, we'll listen to you. We will appreciate the work. I have offered this in the past and hasn't really gone anywhere, so I'm offering it in public so that everybody knows that this is on the table. I will bring 25 to 50 people, designers who know all about the city, most of whom live in the city or work in the city, and we will help you do this. You have help, and we're there for you. You just need to agree that it's going to be a worthwhile effort. We also have a potential destination for the facility at the Liars Bench, and that'll really increase our creativity. So we're going to have a wonderful, wonderful creative options for housing Portsmouth's future.
Thank you, Bob.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Westcott. I'm a Portsmouth resident. Thank you all so much for all of your efforts. I was a happy member of Group L. Thank you very much. But to also hear everyone else's input and concerns, and it was really fascinating to see how much overlap there was between groups. And wanted to share with you all, in our last session, we had a wonderful discussion, and earlier that day, a question had popped into my mind as I was walking around Portsmouth and appreciating my city. And the question was this, also in light of our political environment these days. We have been doing this, as everyone said, we have been having these conversations for a very long time, and everyone wants action. What one thing, I pose this to the community and to the council, when you are facing these decisions, these requests for action, what one thing would you be willing to compromise on? And I posed that question to my group because I did not know the answer myself. And I still am not sure. Maybe it would be things can be less pretty. Maybe I don't have to have as strong an aesthetic sense. Maybe there could be more units in a building. Maybe whatever. But I pose it to you because I think it will help. What one thing would you be willing to compromise on? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other speakers? Last call for oh, okay. And one on Zoom, perfect. And if you are on Zoom and you would like to speak, please raise your hand now. You're good. You're good up there. Just giving. Listen, I'm not the big guy. I'm new to this. Okay.
Hi, my name is Adam Rudig. I was a member of Group M, great group. This has been a fantastic experience. I want to thank everybody who helped organize it. I'm also a member of the Portsmouth Housing Authority Board, and I just want to say we are here. We're ready to go if you say yes. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Adam. And then we have a member on Zoom.
Go ahead, Mary Sullivan. I think you're muted. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mary. Okay, now go, Mary. You're unmuted. She keeps muting herself, I think.
Okay. Mary, we're going to unmute you, and then you should, if we want to give it another go.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
No, I don't. You would think after 4 years in the Zoom world, we would all be so... I enter meetings on mute all the time. Okay.
She's unmuted, but can't hear her.
Mary, I'm sorry. We you have a few more moments while we clean this up, but yep, you can feel free to email the council and the planning board with your comments, and we will definitely take them in. In closing, I want to thank everyone from the public who came, everyone who came to all of the Portsmouth Listen sessions, the planning board for being here tonight, and my fellow councilors. As has been a clear message tonight, we need to get some tangible action items in. When this was first brought forward, one of the things that I said was, do we need another one, or are we just going to be repeating what we saw in 2017. And I think tonight proved that another one is effective in wrangling in a new group of residents to really take lead and charge on this, and for us as a city, as a government side and as a residential side, to really take accountability of what we want in our future and in our city, and the things that we have not been aggressive enough about. As Councillor Tabor and myself and Councillor Moreau act upon the reactivation of the Housing Committee, we're really excited to take in this information. We welcome you all to join our meetings. They will be posted. They will be Thursday evenings to try to make it more obtainable to the general public. And we have some members that were participating in these listens groups in our committee. But as was stated today, I think it's very clear that this council is ready to be aggressive in the manner that we address housing, especially workforce housing, especially in conjunction with the PHA in some city sites. So I think that is something that I can state pretty unilaterally of this council, is that we are ready to be aggressive and ready to work hand in hand with the planning board, because we know that as a council we can want all the changes that we want, and as a municipality we can, but we need to work in conjunction with the land use boards and making sure that we are representing and doing what is in the best long-term interests of our residents in Portsmouth. So with that, Mr. Hewitt, yes?
Yes, thank you, Assistant Mayor. Before we sign off, I just want to make a statement or an observation that last Thursday, one of the largest housing projects, at least in my memory, was presented to the planning board at 360 units out at Bed Bath & Beyond. And it's a 12-acre site. It's quite large. And I didn't mention at the time, but in the last week, I just thought to myself, if there was one location in Portsmouth that I could see a 6, 7, 8-story high-rise residential property, it'd be that location. And I think it's an opportunity we're not going to get very often to consider allowing something that tall with some incentives for workforce. So I just want to put that out there.
I think that's great. Thank you so much, Mr. Hewitt. Okay, and with that, I would adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Good night, Portsmouth.